Hello and welcome to episode 4 of The Bridge of Love. My name is Erin Cameron, and I will be your host today. The gift, the lesson that we're focusing on today is that love is all that matters. And this is a really early lesson, was a really early lesson for me with my daughter. And I'm going to recall the moment that I learned it. She was probably a few months old at this point. I was well into the experience with her, enough to be very much in the reality of having a different baby. And we were at the time on at the Air Force Academy, and we got out. I don't remember what we were doing in the very moment, but we got out of our car with her. I think I was just sort of being a tourist with my parents visiting. And I remember being sort of on this overlook and I got out of the car with her. I got her out of the car seat. And I'm just, standing there with her, holding her. And I must have been in the mindset of that I was probably in fairly often, that just in this sort of state of confusion, or wondering what the heck. I that's what I'm imagining my mindset was, just kind of this baseline, like, okay, um always just trying to understand. And I got her out of the car seat, and I'm just holding her. She's a baby. She's, tiny. And I had this moment where I could feel that she could feel me loving her. And there was this realization that I was like, well, she can feel love. Sounds simple, and it is sort of, but I was like, well, that, wow, like, whatever it is that's, her disability, or her whatever she can't do or may not be able to do in the future, those questions kind of went away, and they were replaced by this knowing that she could feel love. And I guess in saying that, what I was realizing, or what I actually kind of wondered before that moment, was, what was she feeling? What was her experience of life? What were the sensations that she had? Because her forms of communication were so different, and I was just sort of coming into familiarity with them. She was a bit foreign to me in a lot of ways. I was like, I don't know what, she's experiencing. She didn't make a lot of eye contact, for example. There were things back then that I couldn't gauge, where she was and what kind of things she sensed from the world, what her senses were. So yeah, I just wasn't, I probably wasn't quite sure what she could feel or what she did sense. And in that moment, I knew, just by holding her and just by being in the moment with her, that she felt and she could feel loved. She could feel love, and that she felt loved. I was like, wow, it was quite the moment for me. And I um, always looked back on it throughout my parenting experience with that knowing of that moment that, well, I know that that's part of my purpose is to love her. And another example, which wasn't quite as revelatory as that one, uh, you know, that kind of popped in to my head was that, I was like up in the middle of the night with her, as all parents are, you're feeding them or whatever, trying to get them to go back to sleep. And I remember I hardly ever slept for those first, 2 or 3 years, honestly. But really early on, I've had this feeling uh, that those moments in the middle of the night were so precious. Like I almost didn't care. I found myself not caring that I wasn't sleeping, that I was so sleep deprived. And I had this moment where I was like, I don't care. This is so worth it, because I could feel that love was everything. Like I was like, this is something that should be, I even knew then that I should be appreciating it. And I could just feel how precious it all was, all those moments, even if we were in the middle of the night doing nothing. I was just holding her. So it's kind of amazing to me how just holding her um, was such a big experience for me. I didn't have other means of sensing her. She didn't, crawl around the house and like provide any other feedback to me, for example. Like it was just really interesting how those seemingly simple moments were actually where I learned a lot of stuff. And I think that's the power that they hold, is you don't actually have to be doing anything. You just have to connect to them. And those were moments that I connected to her and her vibration. And it's what I learned in those moments. And it so beautiful. So, yeah, I'm just um holding her in my arms. And in that, I also felt that that was all she needed from me. Um, and this lesson that love is all that matters might be the biggest gift from my experience. It's very clearly one of the moments that I was meant to have a really big realization around, because this realization alone was what gave me, meaning to so much of my experience for so long. Sometimes as a parent, you don't know what else to do other than to love your kid, or you don't know what else you really have to offer them. There were times when Haddon would be upset or in pain or discomfort or going through something difficult, or just yelling for some reason that I had no idea what it was. And I would say, I love you. Does that help? It sort of became this joke in those times where I had no answer. But it's actually quite profound in the context of this lesson, right? Um, I love you. Does that help? Sometimes that's all you can say or do. And it's in learning this, I was like, huh, yeah, that actually makes sense that I would say that. Um, because I believe that it actually does help, that love heals, that it's a healing frequency, a healing vibration. And just being around her exposed me to this almost every day. The love made it all possible. when people would ask me, how did I do it? I would, they're like, how do you do this? Like, I don't know how you do it. And I would be like, I don't either. Honestly, I don't know. I'm just doing it. And in that, I kind of knew I was meant to do it. That's how anybody does anything ever, right? Um, but now I know that the answer is love. And that's what was really keeping me going. And eventually, knowing the love I had for her and feeling the love she had for me brought me into the next level of my journey, because I couldn't just survive on that love that I felt for her or the love that I was feeling from her. Um, I eventually came to find this love within myself. So, how did that come about? There's sort of two parts or levels of that original realization. The first being that she could actually feel love, and that she did feel loved, which I thought were both very beautiful and perfect in themselves. But that second part was that she all she really needed from me was love. Um, this was the sort of deeper part of the lesson, which I know I felt back then, but I don't think I had the capacity to really live it yet. So I always remembered having that realization in the parking lot, holding her in that moment. Um, it was really important to me, and I held it close to my heart. And just like some other moments, you've you heard about, I just went on about our life, which was scary, stressful, um, and full of worry. It could be all of those things all at once sometimes. um, and those things distracted me. You know, they were distracting from this bigger truth that love is all that matters, right? So you can learn a big truth like that, but then there's real life, right? So that's kind of where I was. Um, Sort of like I spoke about, with the dichotomy somewhat. There was a part of me that knew the truth and learned the lesson. And so loving her felt like the most important thing, like as I was going through parenting her and being there for her. But then there was this part of me that insisted on, hanging on to a whole lot of other aspects of our experience, that bummed me out, or that I felt difficulty in, or frustration or anger around. And I held on to those emotions for a long time. um, but I did always keep connecting to the love I felt for her and from her, which has always been very powerful, especially when I can feel it from her. It's interesting to me how sensitive I ultimately became to this connection, because we didn't have very many other forms of communicating it. Um, and that's sort of somewhere in this whole, you know, realization was learning about, that part of that gift was that being around her made me more sensitive to the love, to the meaningful parts of our relationship, to the meaningful part of our connection, which had nothing to do with what we were saying to each other verbally. For example, there's really so many layers to um, what this has meant in my experience. Um, Knowing that love is all that matters, but also, learning how I sensed it and how I still sense it from her, or that she sort of made me that sensitive by necessity, I guess. But just this, it was just sort of this natural part of what I developed, yeah, within our relationship, which I've come to really understand more about as I focus on the more um, spiritual aspects of, the last um, couple of years that I've come into and realized I always had. That's what's so sort of entertaining to me about, when you focus on spiritual things and then you realize that was sort of in you the whole time. This is certainly one of those things, how sensitive I became to, her vibration, anyone's vibration, my own vibration, and that's a very natural thing. I just was able to develop it with her, and I think it's one of the great gifts of having a special kid. You go into it thinking they're so limited, and then they show you things that open up new skills for you, new abilities for you. It's amazing. That part is really amazing, and I continue to sort of build on those and um, learn from those abilities that she already has. They already have them. It's really beautiful. So looking back, I was already living this lesson about love. I love the heck out of her. But the power of my consciousness now of coming into this knowing is that I can see that throughout her entire childhood, I was already living and feeling and doing the only thing that mattered. The beauty of where I am now is that uh, I'm even more aware of the preciousness of it, the love we have and share, and that we are. But I had it the whole time. How awesome is that? Um, and this lesson illustrates the simplicity of the spiritual path. It doesn't have to be complicated. All I had to do was hold my baby to feel the truth of all that is. Um, she taught me that. But she also taught me what love is and how to find it within myself, which is, I think, ultimately the most important thing. When I got out of my own way, meaning I dropped judgment of what I should be doing to make her better, make her life more normal, fix her physical being, um, and all the resistance I held around what our lives really were. When I focused only on the love, it allowed our lives to become what they were meant to be. Kind of come more into that, really opened up um, a lot of meaning around our lives for me, and what they were the whole time, which is magical and filled with joy, without so many moments of stress, worry, fear, anxiety, self-analysis. I can now exist with her without these things. Um, Judgment of myself and others, judgment of what was, judgment of what is. I judged myself for not going to get a PhD, for example, to fix her brain. Those are actually all thoughts that I had, the self-analysis, I certainly had all of those. That I myself had to cure her because so far the scientists weren't doing it, and obviously that was the best use of my time and energy, right? Was to go help them. And that would have been a perfect path had it been what I came here to do. But I was called to be with her, to be her mom and love her. I didn't feel like it was a calling, but you don't feel it, you just do it. That's kind of what that's been for me. And you just keep doing it because it's what's calling you. I can say it's a calling now, but I'm not sure I thought that all along. It just felt like what I should be doing, and so I did it. Um, which again, for a long time, I held judgment around that. Um, and in this role of being her mom, I may have done that to extremes sometimes because my definition of parenting was turned upside down and inside out, and you know, by the whole experience. Um, it I didn't have a whole lot of practical examples of parenting because I was just in this whole other category. um, and uh, it, none of the examples that were in my reality were anything that I could draw upon. They just didn't have much to do with where I found myself as a special needs mom. So for me, all of this is how the experience became so filled with, resistance. Um, but also, I could see at the same time I was living all of this, there was this coexistence of beauty, strength that was making me so strong. Um, and the love has always been there. Um, my point here is that the love eventually wins out. I think that's a saying, isn't it? Love wins. For sure. For sure it does. Um, and I think it's our natural tendency to move toward it. And I find if my focus is there and I let the other stuff go, gently loving the me that held those beliefs of being responsible for changing our circumstances, changing her condition, then the truth of the experience emerges as such a beautiful thing. And this truth is that love is all that matters. It is the highest potential of all parent-child relationships and also the highest potential of all relationships. And of course, we're talking about, the love we're talking about today is what I would refer to as divine love. It's the highest form. And this is very different from romantic love. Although I would say that romantic love can connect you to divine love, and often does. And that's probably an entirely different podcast. um, but I just wanted to make that distinction, right? So back to, how I eventually found this love within myself. In channeling Haddon and in channeling myself, that energy and that connection was one of love also. I could feel how much love my soul had for me, how much, my sister had for me, and how much Haddon had for me. There were lessons in the words, in the messages, but almost more important was what I felt when I received them. As I'm channeling it, it's just such an amazing vibration. And you can feel it, the energy moving through. And that's the magic for me of channeling. And the reason I'm passionate about connecting to this bigger part of myself and developing that connection. I feel complete in it, or more accurately, I remember that I am complete. And that's just a natural feeling when you're in that vibration. And I believe that Haddon feels this connection all the time. And her just being here, just the act, she's just here, and being around her is what allowed me to connect to that in myself. That is so powerful to know. Well, that's her power, that's their power, and it's ours as well. But just to affect others just by being, it's pretty awesome. And so that's how she did eventually, teach me to find it in myself. And some of that was through channeling, and some of it was just being around her. In channeling her, she would basically say that there was this higher dimension of consciousness where there is only love. If you remember back to episode 3, that was one of my earliest messages from her. And it said that there's, this place where there's only love. But what she also said very often in her messages was that in order to exist there, I couldn't take with me fear, stress, worry, anger, etc. And her messages pointed this out for a while, the messages, that she had for me. Almost like I didn't notice I was still carrying those things until she pointed it out. And I certainly wasn't aware of how they were affecting my vibration. And none of this happened overnight, but it did eventually happen. And this is how I learned that, with awareness, anything is possible. Even letting go of feelings I had held for much of my life, normal human emotions. And this doesn't mean that I never have them again, although I believe that's possible. And sometimes I feel like I'm pretty darn close to that place, which is super exciting and encourages me. It gives me a lot of encouragement to stay on this path. But it just means that I'm more aware of those emotions when I do experience them. I catch myself in worry or stress or anxiety very quickly. And in those moments, I can stop, go back inside, back into my heart, and breathe. And along this journey, even after I had learned to include these practices in my life, sometimes as we went through things like her being in the hospital with a cold or a respiratory infection, something like that, something that would hospitalize her and scare the crap out of me, which is what very often happened. I would forget those practices. I would forget. And I'd be in the hospital with her. As her mom, of course, I would be scared. Of course, I would be worried. And I would almost forget my power to return to my heart, the power of focusing on love. And in those instances, it was usually because I was just super tired, maxed out, exhausted, physically, mentally, emotionally. And this spoke to the connection of the physical body to all of this, which I will focus on more for sure in a future episode. But once I got that break and I slept and I took care of myself physically, I was able to focus more easily on that higher vibration of love. And honestly, what brings me back always, almost instantly is channeling. But those experiences illustrate how important self-love is also, right? Like I had to make it okay to experience fear, worry, or anything else in order to fully move out of those emotions. I had to make it okay for me. I couldn't judge the fact that I was in them. Otherwise then I would stay my focus would stay there, like, oh, I shouldn't be worried. I shouldn't be stressed. Um, and instead I just sort of, um, made it okay. I loved myself for having them. And what kind of helped me here was in some of Haddon's messages, she would say that love is was underneath all of those emotions. So, which makes sense. Like, why you wouldn't worry about someone or be scared if you didn't love them. And so it's easy. That helped me a lot. That made it easier for me to come back into the love and let go of those, uh, lower frequency vibrations, and to know just that how scared or worried I was directly correlated to how much I love her. So that all makes sense, right? I found that those messages really helpful. So the difference now versus when she was a baby or a younger kid is that I've learned to find that same love in myself and for myself. And once I found that, I was able to even more fully experience my connection to her without getting bogged down in those emotions of the lower dimensions. That's really that final step. Um, there's the level of knowing that love is all that matters, and loving her, and I certainly did that throughout her life. But coming into this level of understanding and letting go of those other heavier emotions, it just strengthened our whole connection all the time. They don't really they don't connect as well with you when you're upset or angry, and that might be true for any kid, right? But certainly for a kid that is so highly tuned to your vibration because they're highly tuned to theirs. So it helped our connection a lot, and it's just sort of a great example of her kind of leading me through this path. Um, you know, she helped me realize that those emotions were kind of in the only thing really in my way of living in this place of pure love all the time. But that took me a while to drop those, and I think I really want to be very upfront about that this um, didn't happen overnight, um, but it did eventually. So that's the lesson for today. And I also wanted to go into a little bit about my community. The Happy Bubble is what it's called. So if you'd like to go deeper into the topics I present on the podcast in a more personal way that you can apply to your life, check it out. I always used to say that Haddon and I were just in our own happy bubble. This was a place where we could be ourselves, enjoy our life in our own unique ways. And it was just my way of creating this safe space for myself and for her to be happy, even when we didn't understand what was going on and why. And so as I was creating the podcast, I was very aware that everyone's experience is different. I have my experience with Haddon, but I'm not super familiar with other special kids. I've been very focused in my own world with her, but I also know that she's not the only one holding this amazing vibration. And I'm not the only one experiencing the wonder and the awe of being around a special kid. Uh, and what excites me is bringing others into a community where they can contribute what it is that their child or their relative or their patients are bringing to the planet. contributing their own experience, their own wisdom. It's important to me to create this positive, high vibrational space where this wisdom can be applied to our real lives, but also where it can expand. That amplifies its effect for everyone. And in that, it becomes like this exclamation point that we're putting on the experience, that it's awesome. And here are all the ways that it's awesome, right? I absolutely love that idea. When you can come here and go through an experience that is so challenging at times and, so mysterious at times, and then you find yourself not on the other side necessarily, but you're still in the exact same experience after you discover that it's literally the best thing you could have ever chosen as a soul to experience. That alone is such an amazing feeling. And doing that with other people is what takes it to the next level, I think. So having a community like this was just the next obvious step for me, because I can get into this place in my own consciousness. I can sit alone in my house and write books or whatever, but I didn't want to do it alone. I knew the next level and how to maintain it. The most fun way I could think of to maintain this high vibration, this way that I see life, and really be there all the time, is to do it with others. It's basically the support group of my dreams. So if any of this calls to you, you can read more about it on my website, erincameron.org. I'd be delighted to have you. Even if you're a new parent and all of this sort of sounds good, but you're still very much in the, everyday struggle, as it were. I've totally been there. And I still have those days. And I see this community as this amazing place where you can actually take this wisdom and apply it and be supported and buoyed by others, and kind of connect to this higher vibration on a regular basis. And I think it will be amazing. So thank you so much for joining me today. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. And as always, I'm sending you so much love from all of us. And until next time, take care. Bye.